Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is fun. I'm Robin Schwartz. I am the program and grant director of the Community Arts Partnership of Tompkins County, which is in Ithaca, New York, and we serve Tompkins County artists and organizations. The Spring Rights Literary Festival is one of our programs. And we also do, I'm going to ask everyone to go on mute. I can hear somebody rustling. The Spring Rights Literary Festival is one of our annual events, which include the Greater Ithaca Art Trail, the Artist Market. We have a gallery. We have a vintage art sale. Um, One of you co-hosts, make sure everyone's on mute. We also have 5 arts grant programs for Tompkins County artists and not-for-profit. So if any of you are in Tompkins County, our website, I will put it in the chat, is artspartner.org, artspartner.org. This year alone, we distributed $575,000 to artists and organizations. And since 1993, which, believe it or not, is the year I started at the organization, we've distributed over 6.5 million. So that's how awesome we are. We have additional Zoom workshops happening Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. Check them out. And we also have free workshops, 8 additional free writing workshops through August. So before we jump into tonight's events, everyone stay on mute throughout the event. Feel free to use chat heavily. Do you guys give me a thumbs up if you guys want to do like a Q&A afterwards? Yeah, we'll do that afterwards. We can all go off mute. Your bathrooms are down the hall. We are recording this session. And I'm going to thank our wonderful Spring Rights sponsors. Because of our sponsors and funders, we're able to have 40 free events and pay the artists. So that's kind of amazing. So we're thanking Ithaca College, Wegmans, M&T Bank, CFCU Community Credit Union, the Odyssey Bookstore, and the Ithaca Marriott. And we receive grant support from poets and writers in the Tompkins County Tourism Program. And our media sponsors are The Root, WITH Radio, WSKG, and Cinemapolis. And I'm now going to turn the mic over to Naomi Daniluk. Her bio is from hiking Mount Vesuvius and Arenal, you can correct me if I said that wrong, volcano, to walking Hadrian's Wall and the black sand shores of the Venezuelan coast, to earning a master's in screenwriting from the National Film School of Ireland. Her experiences trekking the world have been a vital muse for Naomi's creative endeavors. Consequently, her stories are infused with the exotic and often otherworldly. And Naomi, I will put your website link into the chat while you're talking.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. So we're really excited to be holding this reading because a bunch of us have been in a local writers group, and we have compiled some really neat stories together into an anthology called Beware the Light, an anthology of dark fiction. And it's 5 cautionary tales that warn against things that lurk in the light. And I think that Robin might be sharing it, but in case you're curious about the book, I'll just put the link right there. So we're going to be sharing little excerpts, 10 to 15 minutes each, from our stories in the book, just a bit of a teaser. And we're just going to go in order of how it is in the anthology. So I'm going to give the mic over to Cheyenne. And since I don't have your bio right in front of me, Cheyenne, either Robin can read it or you're welcome to introduce yourself. But she will be our first reader.
I actually have it right in front of me.
Oh, perfect. Okay, I'll let you take over.
Oops, remind me of your last name, Cheyenne.
Shaffer.
There we go. It's alphabetical. I know the alphabet. There we go. Cheyenne Shaffer is a speculative fiction writer from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She's a graduate of the Odyssey Writing Workshop and the Never Ending Odyssey, and her work has previously appeared in Factor 4 magazine and Aseptic and Faintly Sadistic, an anthology of hysteria fiction. That sounds great. This fall, she will be relocating to start her MFA in creative writing. And let me make your head bigger.
Okay, so my story in the anthology is called The Devout, and it is a dark science fiction story. I'm going to be reading one of many pieces. Jules, New York City, New York, May 6th, 2062. As soon as her mom's phone rang, Jules knew she was in trouble. She heard it all the way from her room, because Gen Alpha thought it was so cool for their phones to make noise the way the old corded phones in history books used to. And of course, her mom was 100% alpha hole. A month ago, Jules wouldn't have thought twice about the sound. Her mom's phone had been going off 6 times a day, spouting the chorus of "your phone," which alpha holes thought was a hilariously ironic ringtone, every time some scammer rando dialed her. But since she'd updated her scam block, the apartment had been quiet. After all, phone calls were only for scammers or serious business. Now, hearing the 30-year-old pop song blaring from the phone's tinny speakers, Jules could only think of one reason someone might have serious business with her mom. She kept playing her video game, Cosmic Warfare 2, as if acting innocent could change anything. Maybe some scammer had already found their way around the new update. But no. The floorboards creaked under her mother's weight as she stood. R.I.P. Jules in 3, 2, 1. Jules, her mother hammered on the door. Open up, we need to talk. For a moment, she tried to imagine an alternative to opening her door. Sneaking out the window? Kids did it all the time in those old-fashioned sitcoms about small-town America, but try it from a 5th-floor walk-up. She could throw on her headphones and pretend not to notice her mom, but that wouldn't last long, and her mom would just be twice as mad. She sighed. Sometimes in her game, the only option was to run toward the enemy, guns blazing. She pictured herself as the main character, Ava Shadow, all decked out in Kevlar and thick-soled boots, as she crossed the room to answer. She opened the door. What's up? As if she didn't know. Her mom crossed the threshold without waiting for an invitation. Miss O'Brien called. Sounds like you said some interesting things in class today. Yeah? The controller still hung from Jules' left hand, and she ran her thumb gently over the worn joystick. About aliens? Jules shrugged. Aliens are interesting. They're fictional, Jules. And you would know. You've been to every planet? We don't have to experience something to know it's true. God tells us so. Jules flopped down onto her bed. What part of the Bible is that again? Martians 3:16? Don't be cute. Jules hated when her mom said that. All her life it was, oh, you're such a cute kid. Or, now that she was nearly 13, I'm sure the boys all think you're cute. But the second she said something her mom didn't like, suddenly it was, don't be cute. Make up your mind. Why were you telling the other kids that aliens exist? Her mom asked. I read about it. Do you know how many people in history have claimed to see them? Claimed, honey. People claim all kinds of things. The church has looked into all that, and you know they've discredited it. Their official stance is that all God's living creatures are right here on Earth. And you just believe them. They're the church, her mom laughed. Jules didn't. She just dropped her gaze back to the controller, rotating it in her hands. You believe what the church tells us, don't you? The humor had gone out of her mom's voice. Now it carried a sharp edge. I don't know, Jules mumbled. You don't know. She sat up, her voice gaining strength. No, I guess I don't. Why not? Because I don't get what makes them the experts on, like, everything. Johnny says they didn't even run the country until, like, 2030 something. He says before that, we specifically didn't have to be all Christians, and there were even different types of Christians. It was called freedom of religion. Did you know that? I know I might have to have a talk with Johnny's mother. But did you? Of course I knew, honey. I was alive back then, before the Christian unity. Just a kid, but still. How old was her mom anyway? So if the church knows everything, why weren't they always in charge? Her mom settled onto the bed beside her. Nothing starts out perfect. You try things one way, And if they don't work, you change them to make them better. Over time, we realized letting the church be in charge would be the best for everybody. So we did it. But if some people weren't Christians before, how was that the best for them? Becoming Christian is the best thing for everybody, don't you think? Jules laid the controller on the bed beside her. Clearly, she wouldn't be getting back to her game anytime soon. I guess I don't feel like it's that big a deal in my life. She'd expected an explosion, but her mom was surprisingly calm as she asked, "Why is that?" Jules paused, considering. It doesn't feel real. I can pray, but it's not like getting God on the phone and hearing his voice. People say God talks to them, but that's not really what they mean, you know? And there are supposed to be angels and things. I can't imagine seeing something like that in real life, can you? No, her mom said, and Jules expected her to look surprised, as though these were all new ideas to her. She didn't. But it's meant to be that way. If it were easy to prove, it wouldn't be faith. Jules still didn't understand why faith would be more valuable than proof, but the first notes of "your phone" blasted from her mom's pocket, saving her from having to ask. "Hello?" her mom said. Jules couldn't remember doing anything else to earn a phone call home. Maybe this really was a scam. A frown creased her mom's face. No, why? Okay, definitely not a scammer. What could Jules possibly be in trouble for now? TV, her mom said, though still on the phone. Channel 6. The television flickered at her command, replacing Jules' game with footage of a desert town. A blue banner at the bottom of the screen read nonsensically, "Divine judgment at truth or consequences?" In the video, flat-topped buildings lined the streets, some in surprisingly bright colors, but no one went in or out of any of them. Something was wrong. Cars weren't moving on the road. Most were parked, though it looked like one or two had crashed or even been abandoned. A couple times, the panning camera offered a brief glimpse of what looked like piles of clothes on the sidewalk. It seemed absurd. However, all attempts so far have been unsuccessful, a female newscaster's voice said over the footage. Government officials are convening now to discuss the police's next course of action. The video cut to a generic-looking older man in a suit. This has been an absolute tragedy for New Mexico and the whole United States, and I won't rest until that beast is back in hell where it belongs. The word tragedy stuck in Jules' head. Those hadn't been piles of clothes on the sidewalk. Those had been bodies. By that point, her mom had excused herself from her phone conversation and was watching along. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she barely breathed. Mom, what is this? Jules asked. It's your proof. She pointed at the screen. The video had changed again, this time showing something otherworldly. A dark shape with too many legs shifted in an alley, contrasting unsettlingly with the brightly colored buildings around it. It was huge, its head nearly level with the roof of the house it huddled against. Hell has sent us a demon. The end.
Thank you, Cheyenne. It's a great cliffhanger. What you all think? Hi, I'm Keegan Young, also of the Good Liars Club. Sorry, I was supposed to open up and host, having technical difficulties. So we're going to move right along here, and I'm going to introduce our next author, budding author, Devin Hunt. Feel free to go ahead and introduce your piece.
Hi, I'm Devin. My piece is not like that in the same way. It's more film noir than sci-fi. All right, here we go. Hank sips coffee as he stakes out the office building from the overpriced midtown coffee shop across the street. Hank likes stakeouts and coffee shops. Clean-shaven men with quietly expensive clothes and gray streaked hair can stay warm and unmolested for hours. Afternoon fades to dusk, and booths full of parents with children give way to college students writing and cramming. Hank finally covers his mug when they come to refill it, checking his notes one last time. The building where the letters get delivered is 6 stories, tall for the 1920s when they built it, rumored to have been a speakeasy. The building is zoned commercial on the bottom 4 floors and residential for the top 2. All mail comes and goes from office 421, which records say is in the northeast corner of the 4th floor. He glances up one last time, hoping the notes will spark something. All the offices in the building except that one have gone dark. A thin line of light shines around the thick curtains. Someone is there late. It would be an unnecessary liability to use a fake address full of real people. Verdict, probably safe to go in on Monday. But as Hank rises to leave, the curtains part, revealing a broad figure who opens the window. It stands aside, and something massive spreads its wings and flaps out into the night. Holy shit, Hank hisses to himself. The neighboring table looks his way, and Hank waves sheepishly. Sorry, just a bird. The students go back to their laptops and their cups of dark propellant. Hank pays the barista, or baristo. Hank's not sure what you'd call a young guy serving coffee in a place this pretentious, and hustles out. He doesn't want Danny worrying that he's late. He hasn't taken 3 steps down the sidewalk before he bumps into a man wearing a strange white hat, staring up at the buildings like a tourist and talking on his phone. The man curses in what's probably German as Hank hurries home. What's the biggest bird you've seen in the city? Hank asks Danny as they sit down for dinner, scooping beef stroganoff out of a skillet. Biggest bird. There's these seagulls down at the docks. Great black-backed gulls. And, well, they live up to the name. They're humongous. She holds out her hands as wide as they go, with black backs. Why? Probably big enough, he muses. I saw a bird tonight, but the wings were probably too wide to have been a gull. She pokes him in the arm. Does Renee know that you're spending the firm's money bird watching? I wasn't. It flew out of the window of an office I was watching. An office? She sputters. Where? Midtown. Someone working late set it free, maybe? Probably an exotic pet that got too big for an apartment. Or it could be you're starting to see things in your old age, she teases, grinning over her glasses. Me? Old? I thought I was going to live forever. Monday morning, paperwork in hand, Hank enters the building owned by VF and Associates, opting for the stairs over an untrustworthy ancient elevator. In the furthest corner of the 4th floor, their office door reads 421 in Art Nouveau gold lettering on a blacked-out window. When Hank knocks, nobody answers, despite it being well into Monday morning. Extra curious, since someone was definitely here late on Friday. Good mysteries are rare in a lawyer's office, and this was the first one in years. He had to admit that the steady check was nice, but he missed real PI work. Time for Plan B. Inside the only occupied office bordering 421, Hank finds an interior designer whose business is new and who is more than happy to entertain an interested stranger. Hank doesn't say that he's a potential client, but he lets the guy imagine he might be. Hank moves about the office, complimenting the bold choices and clean lines. The young designer offers him coffee, and once he leaves to get it, Hank slips out an open window onto the wrought iron fire escape clinging to the outside of the building. Hank tries not to look down as he moves to the window that the giant bird left through on Friday. The window, though ajar, barely budges when Hank pulls on it, and he has to use his full strength to open a big enough gap to slide through. Is he getting old? He saw someone open it so easily on Friday. He won't get any answers to his growing pile of questions out here. He slips inside. Austere room, dominated by one massive ornate desk, giving more the impression of a private study than office space. One parrot stand, no other evidence of any birds. 2 empty but dirty soup bowls, both decorated, not purely functional. The dried soup at the edges isn't 3 days old. People were here over the weekend. Verdict, someone lives here. Someone whose signature he needs. With his pile of questions becoming mountainous, Hank creeps through an open door into a tall octagonal atrium with white marble floors and walls. Sunlight warms the space as it filters through the frosted glass ceiling 2 stories above. The centerpiece of the room is a freestanding spiral staircase rising 2 floors, and sliding down the balustrade is the devil himself. He lands on 2 bare feet not 5 paces away and lowers his horns. Hank tries to stuff down his rising panic. He needs to focus. You angling to die? The creature says, pawing at the ground. Hank puts his hands out wide. He doesn't carry a gun anymore, but almost wishes he still did. With his adrenaline spiking, Hank takes in the satyr devil. Humanoid, a goat head on a thick neck, one horizontal pupil fixed on him. From the neck down, more like a chimpanzee or a gorilla than a man. Black fur, thick arms ending in four-fingered hands, thumbs, no pinkies. A bulging tan sash wrapped across one shoulder, contents unclear. Monochrome gray t-shirt, tough canvas work pants, no shoes. Wide-set furry feet, each with a thumb. The devil's bare feet seem familiar with the polished, smooth floor. Too many unknown variables to let this degenerate into a fight. Verdict? Talk your way out of this. Easy now. Your lawyer sent me. I'm Hank Fredericks from Doucette, Copley, and Olson. I have some papers I need you, or someone, to sign, he says, slowly gesturing at the papers in his pocket. Something is going on here, but it's not money laundering. A second voice echoes from the top of the stairs, but Hank doesn't dare take his eyes off the danger in front of him. Scuff, I don't think this man is likely to be responsible for our friend's continued absence. Then why is he here? The devil, Scuff apparently, replies, not looking away from Hank either. The owner of the second voice comes into view as a truly massive man descends the stairs. His bright high tenor calms Scuff, who straightens into a less violent posture. Hank tentatively lowers his arms. The man's smiling face is a patchwork of old stitched scars, a pattern that extends down his neck and even onto his hands where they aren't hidden by the sleeves of his suit jacket. His matching trousers are well-fitting. Everything looks tailored. Hank imagines there's nothing his size is in stock at Macy's. The scarred man towers over his infernal sentinel and places a gentle hand on the furry shoulder. Scuff leans into the touch, a strangely tender and childlike gesture from a monster who had just threatened Hank with murder. Scuff's attention still follows Hank. The expression on the goat's face with its horizontally pupilled eye is unreadable, except for obvious hostility. The giant squeezes Scuff's shoulder affectionately. You must forgive Scuff. Surprises are so often dangerous, and he only wants to keep us safe. You must understand that you appearing here like this most certainly qualifies as a surprise. Sorry. Hank shakes his head slightly, helping him refocus on his task, his ticket back out of here. My name is Hank Fredericks, here on behalf of Doucette, Copley, and Olson. Yes, I recall, the giant replies calmly. Hank soldiers on, forcing his hands not to shake as he offers the paperwork. I have some paperwork for someone to sign. I could have replied by mail, as I have for the last 100 years. You have very enterprisingly come as so far as to enter our home. The welcoming expression slips just slightly and is swiftly replaced. Hank has been in the game too long to miss danger hiding behind a smile. This man might be just as willing to kill. You must be, VF or an associate? Hank asks, tightly controlling his voice to keep from stammering. Forgive my manners, the stitched giant beams. My name is Victor Frankenstein II. You have no doubt heard of my father, though little in those stories is true. He spreads his arms wide, showing himself off with a wink. My first friend told me that I should carry my father's name, maybe find some redemption for the both of us. You may call me Victor. With introductions behind us, I ask once again, why are you really here? Because I saw something huge fly out of your window this past Friday. It sounds so silly and small a reason now that he's saying it out loud. Sir? Hank can't bring himself to say Frankenstein, as if saying it would admit that he believed he could be facing the fictional monster. That would be crazy, and Hank wasn't crazy. The creatures exchange knowing glances before Victor breaks the silence. So the reason you're here is that you were snooping, and you couldn't help but snoop a little more. I suppose I could forgive you a little home invasion. Are you not a professional snoop? Irrepressible curiosity, professional hazard, etc., etc.? I'm an investigator, so... Yeah, Hank shrugs. He hopes disarmingly. Friday, Father, Scuff presses. He said he saw Ariel on Friday. He did indeed, the giant agrees. What did you do with Ariel? Scuff accuses. Do with Ariel? Hank retorts. Nothing. I only saw it for a second before I lost it in the dark. Him, not it. Scuff surges forward, twisting his head to present his horns, one broken, the other spiraling a foot longer into a lethal spear. He is restrained in a flash by the hand of the giant, the monster, Frankenstein's monster, Victor Frankenstein II. Investigator Fredericks, as startling as you may find our appearance, never describe anyone here as it. Frankenstein's eyes are hard. Hank swears he sees lightning flash across them. It won't happen again, Hank manages not to stammer. So what did you see? What direction did you see our friend fly? Victor asks. North? I didn't get a great look at him, Hank says carefully. A third voice, small, pensive, and slow, drawls. So, Central Park, as he'd suggested. He'd hoped to hang from the angel's wings. Seeing no one move, Hank searches for the source of the small voice. The new voice chuckles as Hank fails to find its origin. 3 long, curved claws emerge from the baby sling around Scuff's barrel chest to wave to Hank before catching the edge and pulling it down to reveal the face of a fuzzy baby? No, a sloth with a neat buttoned suit vest and a tie. The trail is 3 days cold and getting colder. Scuff growls down at the small creature. He's never been gone this long. If he was lost or hurt, someone would have seen him by now, and it would have made the news. Perhaps. And perhaps the sudden appearance of a professional snoop isn't the disaster it looks like. Victor muses aloud. You see, Investigator Fredericks, while we might cause alarm walking down the street, you wouldn't get a second look. Would you look where we cannot and find our missing friend? I'm sorry, I don't do private work anymore. I'm afraid I can't help you, sir. Victor Frankenstein II smirks at the honorific. Hank would have agreed to almost anything to get back into private investigating work or out of this office, but not this with these. After a concerning pause where Hank worries he might never be getting out of here, Frankenstein's countenance brightens. He says, I understand, as if he hadn't a care in the world. In any event, I will take the paperwork. If you have gone to the trouble of delivering it in the face of obstacles, it must be rather urgent indeed. So let us not delay its return any further. Would you care to step into my office? Frankenstein gestures back the way Hank had come. Scuff takes his leave, wordlessly stomping up the steps. The desk's massive size makes more sense with Victor behind it. The giant takes the papers and reads them, eyes darting with uncanny speed, and signs them in a matter of seconds. With their business concluded, Victor offers his hand. Hank shakes it, hiding his reluctance to touch the creature. Hank's whole arm comes alive with a tingling electric sensation he can't name, like feeling returning to a sleeping limb, but wonderful. It's been a pleasure, Investigator Hank Fredericks. You too, Victor Frankenstein. Crazy. He's gone crazy.
Thank you. So we didn't read Devin's little bio. What began as self-care grew into a habit, then a hobby, and now a passion. Writing for Devin has grown from a childhood dread to an adulthood pleasure. So Keegan had technical difficulties. Did your computer try to update itself?
Yeah.
Yes. So Keegan, I'm going to read your bio here, if that's okay.
Okay.
Keegan Young. Keegan Young is a 40-year-old male living in Ithaca, a systems-impacted fiction writer-poet who earned 2 degrees while incarcerated. He works with systems-impacted people in the community, and he performs poetry at local open mic nights. So let me highlight you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to read my story, All That Glitters, an excerpt from this. I would say it's historical fiction with a bit of dark fantasy. You'll have to decide for yourself. I'm going to start with a disclaimer, however. I do not support colonization in past, present, or future, nor do I support the mistreatment of Native peoples, past, present, or future. This is a work of fiction written from the point of view of a Spanish soldier who would have been indoctrinated with the tenets of colonialism. And in the spirit of accuracy, these perspectives are included in the narrative. Now, for the story. Alonzo found himself and Diego trekking further inland with a few of their soldiers. The soldiers accompanying them were fresher, younger, and less experienced. Alonzo and Diego were now the veterans here. Having been on so many voyages with so many other ship hands and soldiers, colonists, all their faces blended together, Alonzo could not be bothered to learn their names and distinctions anymore. He doubted Diego had ever tried. So it was that Alonso followed behind the much-inflated Diego, after, of course, John the native, their guide. Diego ordered the soldiers heedlessly about to check this or that bush for provisions, stopping at certain trees to inspect the bark while saying, "Ah, yes," as if it meant something. Alonso just rolled his eyes and hiked up his pack. John the native kept stopping to turn and stare after Diego and his distractions. Alonso was uncertain. At one point, Diego became the de facto leader in this quest, but he was too tired to argue or lead himself. Besides, it was a simple enough mission. How badly could Diego bungle it? After marching since dawn and breaking for a light meal, they came across a river. "Wow," Diego said, "that is a big river." It was, as Diego eloquently observed, rather large. John the native spoke a few words, some which probably meant river or some such. Alonso grunted as if he understood. An adventurous gleam in his eyes, Diego said, "Let us see how far it goes." The soldiers looked about with widened eyes. John blinked. Alonso pushed forward, saying, "Why do we need to do that? Let's just report back to the lion and tell him we found him a river that will satisfy our needs. No need to run into a native ambush or accidentally discover some poisonous snakes or ravenous animals." Alonso eyed the thick brush uncertainly. "Who," Diego scoffed, "is the expedition leader here? I forget. Is it you or me?" He scratched his head, doffing his helmet theatrically. "You," Alonso moaned, knowing to argue otherwise would stall the task even further. Diego is capable of holding on to the tiniest squabbles until all else had relented. "You are the leader of this expedition. Look, you have found a river. Perhaps the lion will let you name it after yourself, but let us retire to camp first." Diego casually drew his sword and laid it on his shoulder. He glanced about. The soldiers looked away uncomfortably. John, the native, began edging away from all of them, eyes bouncing about between the others. Again, Diego said quietly, a hint of threat in his voice, "I thought I was the leader here." Alonso sighed. Since this new La Florida mission had started, Diego had been rather more full of himself than usual. He doubted Diego would actually raise a sword against him. It was mostly just bluster for the new underlings. It would probably do no harm to let him continue to play the leader. "I suppose," amended Alonso, "we could go a bit further." "Right," Diego said exuberantly, pointing his sword. "As I said, onward!" They followed the river for a ways. Diego now mostly led, John the native following him wordlessly. The soldiers were whispering among themselves. Alonso saw this, though he doubted Diego noticed. They'd heard stories of earlier native encounters. The fortification being built was for their own safety, after all. There were many native tribes, and many hated each other. A native accompanying them was no assurance of protection. One of the young soldiers spoke up. Juan, his name may have been. "We must remember, as Spain and God ordained, should we meet any natives," he glanced at John the native, other natives, newer ones, "we must recite the requerimento." John the native glanced about obliviously. Yes, said Diego, "of course." He clearly was less concerned about authorities higher than himself at this moment. Also, he and Alonso had survived more horrors during their New World explorations to feel wary of the crown and the church. The sovereigns ordered and ordained from the safety of their thrones, while their footmen lived the true travails of the world, surviving some but mostly dying in unfamiliar land. Though Alonso began to see after a time that perhaps they were themselves perpetrating some suffering on the natives. He failed to see the necessity of stringing up 13 natives on a gibbet and burning them alive to honor Jesus and his apostles. Alonso and Diego were, to put it lightly, a bit jaded to sacrosanct morals and rigid rules. This Alonso and Diego shared, though the soldiers had yet to learn. The young excursionists looked at each other, unsure about the older men's lax attitude. After more walking, Diego became bored with following the river, decided to track a bit off course. This Alonso could have predicted. It was the danger of putting Diego in charge of anything. Fortunately, Alonso was spared the need to speak up. Another soldier, perhaps named Cristobal, spoke up. Senor, perhaps we should get back to camp. We stray too far." With all the authority his seniority could muster, Diego said, "What pikeman is questioning me? Is it not your job to follow orders rather than give them? You are mere fighters, but we are conquistadors." He slapped his morion in punctuation. A third soldier, Lope, glowered with lidded eyes. He gripped his pike tightly. Alonso spoke quietly. "We are all here under orders of the line to discover a river. This we have done. Now we must report back." The other soldiers straightened their backs and puffed their chests out in solidarity. Diego looked at Alonso, then considered the soldiers with a casual glance. A moment passed. John, the native, walked into the brush with an unreadable look. Most of what he did was indecipherable to Alonso. Diego shrugged, looked away. "Perhaps you are right. Exploring gets my blood up. I enjoy it so." Yes, we've gone quite a ways. Time to get back. Tell the lion of our success. A visible sigh went through the soldiers. Alonso felt the tension in his shoulders release. But first, Diego said, striking further into the bush, I must piss. A horse cannot carry all the piss I have. The soldiers made exasperated noises. Alonso chuckled silently. Many minutes passed. The soldiers shifted restlessly. Alonso whittled at a stick. A soldier with furrowed brows said, Where's our native guide gone to? Alonso shrugged. Who knows? That man is a mystery. Even more so than Diego, Alonso thought. Finally, Diego returned, breathless, face flushed. Come, see what I found. The soldiers began to protest, but Diego was already gone, branches swishing in his absence. Knowing the only way to retrieve Diego would be to humor his temporary diversion, Alonso followed. The soldiers conferred angrily amongst themselves, but eventually went as well. Following a game trail, Diego far ahead, they went further and further downhill into a valley of sorts. Finally, in the shadow of a bluff, they saw Diego standing with John the native. As Alonso approached, John smiled. It unnerved him. Diego gestured at John. Show him what you showed me. Go on. Baring many white teeth, John reached over to Diego's ear and tugging his gold earring. Then he pointed towards a black maw in the face of the bluff. You see, Diego said, as if it were obvious. Alonso meant to question him, but John and Diego vanished into the darkness. Diego's arm appeared beckoning. Come, look what our John has shown me. Lope protested. Senor, we must go back to report on our original mission. He tried for a commanding voice, but it came off more puling. Diego's face popped out of a pool of blackness. He replied, but think of this. When we tell of our discoveries, a river, but also a cave of wonders. Yes? He vanished again into the gloom. Lope cursed. Alonso slowly made his way down. Cristobal spoke. Senor, you are his friend. Can you not speak with him? Help him see reason? Alonso spoke without turning. Friend? Not quite. Reason? Not in this life. Stepping into the cavern entrance was like submerging into inky night. Though initially blinded by the transition from bright sunshine to dimness, Alonso let his eyes adjust a few moments. A tunnel of darkness led to a somewhat lit area, a cave or underground room of some kind. Treading carefully, he made his way forward, hand out for the walls he felt more than saw. Not long after, he heard the soldiers arrive behind him, cursing as they encountered the obscurity. Moments stretched into boundless time as he felt his way toward a growing light. Alonso finally broke out into a chamber of some kind. Half was rocky cavern and dripping stalactites to his left. Half was dank earth and dripping roots to his right. Diego was by the far wall, staring into it, John grinning by his side. As Alonso picked his way over the rugged floor, hearing the soldiers arrive and marvel at the chamber, something bothered him. He couldn't say what exactly. Perhaps it was that Diego had been standing still for so long, an uncommon event indeed, or that John the native was grinning, something he hadn't done before, as he pointed at the wall before Diego. Stepping up beside them, Alonso looked upon the wall. It had many layers and striations, some luminous, some sparkly, earthy colors, and not. But the one which held Diego's attention so avidly was the thick vein of gold running through it all. Is she not beautiful? What a find! The lion will be pleased with my discovery. His eyes were rapturous. John the native wouldn't stop grinning. He was also talking nonstop, chattering that language Alonso could barely catch but a word for every 20. They'd only known John the native a short time, but this was the most animated he'd ever been. He was more likable as a silent scout. Alonso continued to look about, puzzling at the cause of his unease. The soldiers clustered together, inspecting rocks and roots, making their way over to them. As they clumped up to the wall, Diego finally, briefly, tore his eyes away from his prize to glance at the men. See, is this not a worthy find for our lion? Will they not be glad I decided to explore in this direction? He said this, fully ignoring John standing right there. Juan the soldier had disbelief tinged with worry written on his face, perhaps the same unknown fear that gnawed at Alonso. Juan's voice quavered, but why? This place, so far in, under the ground. Diego again admired the gilt streak and whispered intimately, as if to it alone, you could say it called to me. And that's all for now. So I'm going to pass it on to our next reader, Kyle Thompson.
And let me read Kyle's little bio. Kyle is a writer, crafter, and miniature painter, daylighting as a software developer from Corning, New York. He lives on a hill with his wife, Kim, 3 hyperactive herding dogs, and a grumpy black cat. That's because there are hyperactive herding dogs in the house. He goes on adventures whenever possible.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'll be reading an excerpt from my story, Heretic Angel God. We're in the genre now of grim mud and blood fantasy, as I like to think of it. So here we go. Gustav had been returning home, having left when the sun was still below the horizon. It was well known that hunters should seek the blessings of the great stag in the small morning hours, as that was when that primordial force drove the other animals from their dens. He was walking a rough trail through the long grass with 2 rabbits dangling from his belt and a young doe draped over his broad shoulders. Not his most productive of hunts, but he felt some pride that he felled the deer with a single clean shot of a broad-headed arrow to the heart. There had been no need for a chase. Tramping back towards home as the sun was just cresting the eastern foothills, he smelled the smoke. It did not strike him as odd at first. Folk would already be up stoking their fires to begin the day's cooking, and to fight off the cold which encroached while they slept. But when he saw greasy clouds of ash like hideous black worms ascending to the heavens, he knew something was wrong. Then he heard the screams. No, he heard the last of the screams, and then nothing. Stillness. A perfect quiet that belied peace. As he crept towards his own home, dread turned his guts in a sickening dance. Each house he passed was aflame. Gardens had been trampled and torn up. Not a door remained on its hinges. Crimson stains told of tragic endings of those who no longer were, but had been. He could already feel the dead behind him, grabbing at his shoulders, hauling him backwards, begging him not to go and see for himself. And yet, he had to. His home looked like all the rest. Thatched roof still burning, the wattle and daub walls blackened and smoking, cracking and falling in on themselves in the heat. Gustav had longed to go in and search for him, but it was a death trap. Perhaps he'd fled? That thin thread of hope, pulled tight as it was the only reason Gustav kept moving. He pushed on, making his way to the market. A wretched smell was drifting from the middle of the village, meaty and sweet, but sour as well, like a spoiled roast that had been overcooked. He did not want to admit it, but he knew. Of course he knew what he would find. As Gustav peered through the smoke, tucked behind a small woven fence, he spotted them, a collection of shining angels, silvered armor gleaming in the morning sun and the surrounding flames, the Holy King's soldiery, but clearly not here to protect the tithings expected of all good souls, no. These were avengers, bearing lances and swords, clad not in gentle flowing robes, but leather and mail. To one side of the square, Gustav spotted an archangel, person in form, but with all humanity, but hidden by full gleaming plate, reflecting the hell that crackled and popped at the center of the market. The archangel directed the soldiers with deliberate gestures, swords belted and sheathed to their sides. They motioned, and market stalls were broken down to splinters before being added to the fire, ensuring that the cracking bodies frozen in horrible constricting pain would be burned to naught but ash. Next to the archangel stood a mouth of the Holy King, a grizzled, middle-aged man, completely clean-shaven, with a bear's paw branded on his forehead. The man spoke with both hands held above his head, palms up in supplication, and eyes closed so tight that he looked as if he feared that they would spring from his head were he to open them. His face red, he was sweating heavily as his timbrous voice rang out and echoed against the hills. Heretics must be dealt with as weeds. The heretic pollutes the fields of the Holy King, laying waste to all, driving all living things in their surrounds to ruin. There is but one solution to the rot nurtured by the heretic, cleansing flame, that the field might be resown in healthy land and grow rich from the Holy King's hallowed order. He who is obedient and sacrifices in his name is nourished and fed by the Holy King's warmth. He who worships the false gods of the past deserves his fiery wrath. At this point, Gustav spotted a few of the Holy King's men, coldly tossing the remaining bodies onto the pyre. He watched as body after body, blood still drying on their clothes, was heaved into the flames. He watched, that thread of hope still strained tight but unbroken, until it snapped, one end biting into his chest so suddenly that he fell back. He splashed into the muck, A sudden bursting sob escaped his mouth as his boy, the only living thing left after the prior year's famine, cast up a shower of sparks and smoke as he joined the rest of the village in their journey into memory. The archangel's head snapped towards the sound. They extended a single accusing finger, gauntleted in shining steel, at Gustav, and Gustav ran. The Holy King's men kept pace at first, but Gustav knew this land, and their armor and weapons caused them to struggle in the muddy terrain more than he. He lost sight of them not long after leaving the roads behind. For hours now, he had forced down his sorrow, his rage. But as he grew more and more tired, trudging through the slick, high grass and spring flowers, he felt it begin to pulse through him once more. It made his arms heavy. Despite being lighter than his pursuers, the mud seemed to be increasing its efforts at swallowing him whole. Gradually, Gustav's pace slowed. He hardly covered a mile in the final hour of the night's blackness. A small crease of sunlight began to mingle with the fading embers of his home, and Gustav knew that he must stop to rest, to decide what was next. He spotted a small escarpment obscured by brambles. This gentle cradle of earth would hide him while he rested, but his hunter's instincts drove him onward. If he simply walked over and collapsed in this haven, the thicket covering it would do nothing to stop his pursuers from finding him. They would just have to follow the gaping wounds his feet left in the sodden ground. He hurried past until he felt safe backtracking and diverging from his trail, covering it as best he could by crawling carefully through some squat bushes. Soaking wet, he tucked himself behind the brush and the relative safety of the sloped ground. He hoped the Holy King's men would not spot him. He took solace that he was covered in the filth of his flight, knowing this might only hide him further, but he prayed for the Mother of Thorns to protect him anyhow. Gustav awoke from his fitful dreams suddenly, exhausted, delirious. He was not sure what had forced him to quit his restless slumber. The stench of a life now gone still lingered in his nostrils. The memory dragged him back to a reality where to stir prematurely could mean death. He lay there frozen beneath the escarpment, uncertain which direction he would run if he was discovered. He focused on the sounds of mid-morning, trying to separate one noise from another. A breeze brushed through the rough grass of the hill, gently washing over him. A beetle clicked and tapped along an old root dangling from the earth above. Somewhere nearby, birds picked and pecked along the ground, seeking nourishment amongst the blades given life by the melting snow and spring rain. Then, just above him, a footstep. A dull thud near the edge of the curve of earth, giving him shelter. Thud. Another. A gentle, metallic tinkling song reached his ears as a new drizzle began to fall. Surely they had spotted him. Why were they lingering? Why not plunge a spear into his chest and be done with it? Were they waiting for him to run, setting up more men around him so there would be nowhere to go? Perhaps by some miracle they hadn't noticed him yet. Should he just lie still? No, he would run. He had to run. Gustav's limbs felt like lead. He tried desperately to throw his arms under him, to bend his knees and get to his feet. He couldn't move. It was as if they had piled stones on his arms and legs, pressing him into the dirt. How had they done this while he slept, and why? What had he done to so anger the Holy King? He stared at the dirt above him, desperately rotating his gaze, trying to catch a glimpse of his pursuers. He had the thought to turn his head and try to see anything other than the thin sliver of gray sky and the mounded dirt under which he'd hidden, but even the muscles in his neck strained against some unseen force, refusing to cooperate. A Sabaton, caked in still drying mud, stepped beyond the ledge of the escarpment. Greaves that gleamed a cold silver followed. It was them, the Archangel. They stepped over him, and Gustav begged his own eyes to close. They wouldn't. The second foot followed the first. Thud, thud. The dark Archangel's right foot was inches from Gustav's face. The armored man had nearly stepped on his head. Gustav couldn't draw breath. He was in a panic. His muscles refused the commands his own mind was screaming to them. He strained and strained, but nothing would move. What power did the Archangel hold over him? The leg by his face lifted and swung around. The Archangel was turning. Gustav had been seen, and his own body refused to act. He wanted to shout, to scream, to beg, to plead, to cry and sob and question. But gods and their servants are beyond question. He knew this. All he could do was barely flex his jaw and let out a repeated groaning. Uh. Steel scraped and hummed as the archangel bared their blade. Gustav's heart threatened to burst from his chest as the sword slammed down, certain to shatter what remained of the organ. Stale breath finally exploded from his lungs, clouding in the morning chill. Gustav blinked, and as he did, he realized his arms were moving. They clutched at his chest, and he found nothing. No cold metal, no blood, just crude leather clothes, slick with rain and sweat. He sat up and saw no living soul around him. No archangel, no soldiery clad in gleaming mail and steel helms, no spears and no swords, just slick grass, low scrub, and dirt. And that's where I'll leave it for tonight.
Thank you. So next, we're going to Naomi Daniluk. I introduced her at the beginning. So there you go, Naomi.
Thank you. So my story is the last story in the anthology. We're going in order, not alphabetical order, order of the book. We tried to spread it out so all the super dark ones weren't together. So my story is called Light Junkie, just a little dystopian fiction for you. Payment, the woman asks you with clear distrust. You open the lid of the black box, just a crack. Brilliant, white, blinding light leaks out. You close it quickly and the box dissolves back into the shadows of your hands. You both wait a moment to savor the luminous residue coating the inside of your eyelids, moonlight in a world of perpetual night. But the box is quickly reabsorbing the escaped protons. When the lingering light fades to shimmering black, then smoke black, then mud black, then dull black, then black black, the woman finally acknowledges the receipt of payment. 1/4 flux. She takes the box to discharge it. You scratch at your beard in anticipation, a tick you're glad she can't see. Here, she finally says. You can feel that her arm has moved by the displacement of the air. You reach into the black and follow the warmth of her body heat to her outstretched hands. It is holding a syringe. But soon you are holding it, and soon you are sitting in your favorite dark corner of your favorite dark alley, tucked away from the dark streets full of people using every sense but their eyes to see their way in and out of homes with aesthetically pleasing wall art no one will appreciate again, of unlit grocery stores to select canned goods by the sound of their shaken innards, of labyrinths of office cubicles now used for the kind of work the VP of HR could never have imagined, even while tugging the slug during his scheduled closed-door ideation time. You uncap the syringe. Feel the veil of air between the needle tip and your open eye. Even though you can't see it, you blink on instinct. Lashes brush past metal, razor sharp. You force your eyes open. You stick it in. A white water lily unfolds. A fly, shimmering green, lands on it. The green becomes the sunlight filtering through summer trees. Mint leaves are stirred through a mojito with a silver straw. Sparkles on rippling water. Golden hair, bright as a 10,000 lumen light bulb before they were all stolen, broken, or burned out. The sound of a drum beats your brain back into consciousness. Your head throbs to it. You feel pressed down into the concrete by the weight of the darkness. At some point, your light hallucinations turn to dreams. You keep your eyes closed, focus on the filling and emptying of your lungs. Try to remember how your fingers slipped through that golden hair like wind through a North Dakota wheat field. But the memory is forced, like reading a description of a sunset versus viewing it with your own 2 eyeballs. When you finally give up and open them, there is no difference than if you had left them closed. If others bother opening their eyes in the black, you can't know, but you bother. You're not sure whether it's an act of hope or stubbornness or masochism. Every time you get lit, you become even more aware of what you've lost, what the world has lost. But You're past lying to yourself that you'll never do it again. You'd rather be dirty in the light than clean in the dark. You feel sick. You can't just stay here, face in the pavement, drool crusting into your beard, stomach tight as a drum. As you exit the alleyway, you feel the street open up in front of you. The dark is less heavy here, less stale. Apart from the solid object beside you, you know it is there by the way the air has to move around it, how it absorbs the ambient sounds. Even though the street lamp no longer functions, it has the audacity to still take up space. Self-important piece of you kick it. Yep, solid. You walk, out of sync with the relentless drumbeat. Some people prefer to walk in the streets, but most are blocked by car crashes, drivers panicking without traffic lights or street lamps, and the headlight eating dark. Many ended up abandoning their vehicles, blinker lights left flashing until the batteries ran out. At first, after the sun never rose, everyone flailed around, knocking over vases, cursing at whacked funny bones, and foreheads hit on corners of cabinets. But as the weeks and months of blundering blindness persisted, a heightened awareness arose. And while it took months more for some to stop stretching their arms out in front of them, eventually most settled into a trust of their senses, a knowing without knowing how of where the sidewalk ended and the lip of the curb rose. Someone looking for an Alicia told you it was the brain learning how to echolocate, like you're all bats in a cave, and that cave is what used to be your average dot on a map in bumfuck USA. Proprioception was another term you heard thrown around. Whatever the reason, people stopped tripping, noses stopped bleeding. Blind faith took on a new and real meaning. The drumming is getting louder. You're pretty sure it's coming from the church at the center of town. Probably think they're guiding lost souls through the darkness to the light of Jesus or some shit, but you've never bothered to investigate. He wouldn't be there. You're surprised no one has shattered the drummer's hands. Drummers, has to be more than one, never fucking stops. There have been moments where you might have done it yourself, but the masses seem to like it. Some way to keep time, a beat for every second, double beat on the minute, and so on and on and on, because apparently everyone else is afraid of losing track of it. But you don't see the point of keeping track of how long you've existed like this. Perfume ahead, floral and soapy. It doesn't quite cover up the smell of unwashed undergarments. The inside of your nose itches. Sneakered feet pass on your left. Stockinged thighs rub against each other. Bracelets clink softly. You imagine a secretary out on her lunch break, getting her steps in, heels tucked under her office desk. But the offices have all shut down. Maybe she used to be one. By why anyone these dark days would bother to dress in anything but sweats, you can only guess. Maybe she has nothing else to wear. Maybe it gives her a sense of normalcy. Maybe you don't care. Carl, she says as she passes. It was once a question. No, you answer, indicating that you are not Carl, and also don't know any Carls looking for their lost one. You don't need to ask the name of your lost one because you know that this is not him, and no way his scent sensitivity could handle this lady's level of spritz. But out of courtesy, you return the now obligatory greeting. James? No, she says, power walking away in her cloud of stale perfume. A flutter of disappointment moves through you, but you leave it behind as you two walk on. The intensifying beat and consequent headache indicate that you're nearing downtown. You hear the commotion a block away. Must be a couple hundred already congregated there. Shit, you slept too long. The approaching motor drowns out those who, up until this moment, had waited patiently for its arrival, but are now shoving and elbowing each other to get in a better position. It almost drowns out the sound of the drum. You arrive outside the grocery store just in time to see two massive lights pull up. Their light doesn't penetrate like normal, but this darkness is not normal, denser. The delivery truck's headlights search into it like a deep sea submarine. The morning after the sun never rose, people were afraid. Most hid in their homes, carelessly using up all of their candles and flashlights, even lighting multiple at once because they were terrified of the dark. When they went out, it was with generator-run strobe lights and flashlights with a full pocket of batteries. That was before folks wised up and started to hide their light behind closed curtains or down in windowless basements. Before people were mugged for a keychain flashlight. Before every match had been struck and burned to the finger-singeing ends. Before whole houses were set on fire and let blaze to embers. All of the batteries were instantly gone from every store. Those who saw the writing on the wall, or had they been removed ahead of time? You never saw the point in speculating, though you seemed the only one. In the early days, everybody exchanged life stories with everybody they bumped into on the street. Had the sun gone out? It was cooler, but not dark side of the moon cold. Why not? They congregated together for rigorous debates in town hall. Why wasn't the electricity working? How are they supposed to hear the news without electricity? Talk themselves in circles. Why was the darkness so thick? Volcano eruption somewhere? Dust cloud? Government experiment? Some alien weapon? You went to a couple of them yourself. It was the sort of things James would have gone to. But while there had been a few other Jameses, none of them had been your lost one. The second the truck stops, people gather around the headlights like moths, a fluttering of frantic pale faces and flux boxes gorging on photons, significantly dimming the effectiveness of their bulbs. You'll never get close enough to collect more than a stray photon or two, and you need more than that to refill your box. The one you just emptied took weeks. Next truck, another will come. You hear the click, cluck, clonk, conk of the trailer doors being opened. They're never locked. Some self-appointed do-gooders begin unloading the floor-to-ceiling boxes of provisions. Other do-gooders stand guard, creating a path from the truck to the store doors, once automatic, now permanently wedged open. You're pretty sure they're only guarding the goods so they can keep all the canned peaches for themselves. You missed out on the flux, but you stay for your ration. The line moves quickly when no choice is offered. Some peach stealer hands you a can. You shake it and hear corn sloshing inside. At least it isn't mushrooms. Where the food is coming from, you've got no clue. And as far as you know, no one else does either. Backstock from before? Warehouse full of grow lights still on the electric grid somehow? Or could it be that not everywhere is as dark as here? When the trucks first started coming, the crowd called out to the driver, begged him for answers, called him a coward for not getting out to help them unload. Once, there was a riot and the cabin door was pried open. That's when they discovered that there was no driver inside. Someone looking for a Rahid told you that self-driving vehicles use infrared cameras so that they can see in the dark. The headlights were for show. As you walk away, downing every last drop of sweet corn juice, you hear voices from inside the truck's now emptied cargo space. People who finally had it with waiting around for answers. Many have left in the truck, packing themselves in nearly as tightly as the stacked boxes of canned goods. They always say they will come back and tell everyone what they discover, but to your knowledge, no one has ever returned. You stay. It's not even a question. You know this place. You know where to find the payment and where to take the payment. Wherever it is the trucks go, you don't know that place. You let your senses propriocept you to the business district. Dusky cubicles in dusty offices. You once had a cubicle here. Can't do data entry with no electricity. Can't do anything else with no skills. Before the sun never rose, you would have considered sex in the dark to be anonymous. But now, you know your hookup by the way they smell, by the oiliness or roughness of their skin, and you can feel their face to find out features, nose size, hairline, age. Or you could, but you've decided you like to envision everyone who you let fuck you as Jim Buddy beautiful. Sometimes you even imagine celebrities. Why the fuck not? Henry Cavill railing you from behind? It's hot. But most of the time, you just think of James. You run your hands down your hookup's collar, down his sleeves, over his chest. He's thin, but not fit. Most are thin these days. Why work out when you have no one to impress and you need to conserve every calorie you can get? He smells like cedar. His skin is soft and slightly doughy. As you take his pants off, you feel it sewn into his jeans pocket, the hard, cylindrical shape of a battery. When you're done, you get dressed first. Hey, I think you put the wrong pants on, he says, but you're already out of there. I'm going to leave you there. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Naomi. That was great. So we'll ask some questions now. I'll bring everybody up on the screen. Write your questions in the chat, and I'll ask them. And before we do that, I just wanted to tell you that there are more events coming up. For example, tomorrow night, which is Wednesday, there's a reading called Polychromatic Voices, Translation and Performance, which is different people reading, I think, the same text in different languages. There's a reading on Thursday called Existing Beyond the Pen. There's a group reading on Friday. There's 2 events on Saturday. Community storytelling from Cornell's Milstein program, that's student writing, and then a bilingual reading. So I'm going to put springwrites.org in the chat, and also our website, Community Arts Partnership, which is artspartner.org. And now I'm going to bring all the authors up, and I've got some questions already. Here's Kyle. Whoops. Here's Naomi and Keegan and Cheyenne and Devin. Did I get everybody? So one question, you guys, is, well, I had a question. You're a writing group, right? You meet regularly. What was the inspiration for the anthology?
I'll take this one because it was my idea. I've just been working. I have a few different writers groups, and with writers, it's we try to meet regularly, but but I've just met so many really, really talented people that aren't published yet. And so I just wanted a platform for us to start getting our names out there, because I had been sending out various query letters into the void, and it's super frustrating. So I just thought of a loose theme, and I invited the writers that I thought were really talented that I knew to get on board with this first anthology.
How would you like people to buy the book? Is it
yeah,
Veronica?
So I included the link. There's the publishing website. It's is inkalchemybooks.com. It's in the chat, but on there's just the link to Amazon. So you can just go directly to Amazon if you want, but there's a Kindle version and then there's a paperback version. It's print on demand. So, when you order it, they print it for you. And then we're hoping to get some copies in the local bookstores here too.
If you could throw the link in there again, that would be
absolutely.
The Spring Rights link I just shoved in there.
So that's the website that links to Amazon if you just want to go there. Yeah.
And then Sarah Daly wonders, what is your writing processes? Keegan, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably a little bit different for all of us. In this case, we had a super vague writing prompt. What was it like? Things are not what they seem, or whatever. And we all just took that in whatever way we wanted to. And what's the writing process? Sometimes we do have a regular meeting process. We'll meet in a local cafe and just kind of hang out and write. So that's a thing when we can't get to regular writing group meets or do writing prompts. But the writing process, yeah, it's different. I don't know. Whenever I can write, my writing is either whenever I can find time in between other things or late at night when I should be sleeping, but that's when the creative juices are going in my brain and it won't stop and I have to write. So that's my process.
I'm just going to jump on and say, like, I think a deadline helps because like being like, we have to get this thing done and ready for this event at Spring Rights was super, super helpful for me to stop fiddling with it. Cause I'm definitely someone who will fiddle for years on something, but just want to.
Right. When is
Shout
it?
out Naomi for organizing us and herding cats. That was awesome work on your part. And then for me, I'm a little bit on the outside. I'm not a planner. Naomi hit us with the prompt, and I just like to write until a story happens, kind of. And so I usually have like a quick idea, and I just keep going. There's no plan until I'm like, oh, that's the story. I did it.
I'm kind of the opposite, where I'm a big outliner. In this particular story, this was something that I had written like really short, like 1 or 2 thousand word story many years ago, never sold it. And so it fit really well with this prompt that we got from Naomi. So I took it and I really expanded it, made it like a 10,000 word novelette. And what I usually do is I create an outline for whatever my idea is, and then I actually do like a pre-writing by hand where I like take each scene by scene and I just like kind of scribble what I think should happen and try to get like the beats down, and then I'll like actually type up the words themselves.
Mine was inspired by a comic book that I saw once called Sherlock Frankenstein, and I picked it up hoping that it would be about Frankenstein's monsters solving crimes like Sherlock Holmes. And when it wasn't that, I was like, well, forget this noise. I'm going to write that story myself. And so with the introduction of the Island of Dr. Moreau monsters, sort of ended up with the story as you heard it today. But that was a lot of looking up to see if things were public domain, and a lot of just rolling with it and see where it went, and pruning and adding and pruning and adding and pruning. When I brought it to the group, it was almost exactly twice as long as it is now. So a lot of what we have now is sort of the distilled syrup of a spirit of a much larger story that some is preserved in other stories that I wrote subsequently, and some is just gone because it wasn't very good.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in there and say that I think we had a really fun, unique process in putting this anthology out, because normally it's you send your submission out and you get accepted or you don't get accepted, and then you just wait forever and maybe the thing gets printed. But because we were sort of doing this together and learning the process of self-publishing, we went through various meetings where we brought our drafts to each other. We shared them via Google Docs. We got feedback and we made our stories better and better and better. I know mine's better because of these writers. So I really liked the process of collaboratively putting this together.
That was going to be my question, is whether you guys, how much of the final product is from feedback and critique of each other?
My story's entire ending was Devin's idea, which I totally appreciated. It was way better than the ending I came up with.
That's so awesome. Writing groups are so important. Tell us about the self-publishing. How does that work? You just put it
Will I take this one again?
Yeah.
I'm just, I won't get into too many details. I'm a little type A, so when I want to do something, I just like learn how to do it all the way. So I got a DBA so that I can officially be Ink Alchemy Books, and I got a tax number and everything, and I got the ISBN, and I watched a lot of tutorials and learned a lot about putting it together. But I used InDesign, and I made a copy for print and a reflowable copy for the Kindle. I was after the fact, it sounds like, oh, it's not that hard, but it was a lot of learning. Now I can do it again a lot easier, hopefully. But yeah, we just did it. We just made it happen. Anyone can get an ISBN, you know, it's like $25. So you can do it too.
When Naomi says we just did it, Naomi did it. So everything you just heard, Naomi can answer questions.
Great.
There was some discussion of doing a second one. So if people are really excited about this one, most of us have a plan for a second one. I don't know if all of us do, but you know, I'm familiar with these folks and their reaction to a plan that they're not planning for. So I think we'll be all right. If anybody's jonesing for more,
I'm already on it, Devin. So
I knew you would be.
I'm down, but it'll be something totally different, but I'm down.
How did you find each other? Like, were you all friends, or how did that work?
We all just want to say Naomi.
Yeah, I knew Naomi from before, from the but it started as the writing group that we just sort of sent out a call. Say we, like I did it. Naomi did it. For people to come and
you all showed up.
Yeah, we did all showed up. For at Modern Alchemy, the former bar, and it sort of coalesced around that group, and we're meeting once a month, and the people that were going once a month sort of all had the feeling that this wasn't enough, and we wanted more. And so we started organizing sort of an off week thing, and then now we meet almost weekly in some form or another.
Are there more? Are there more of you?
A couple more, but not really.
There's some honorary members.
Yeah.
I've been learning.
And I'm a second writers group member that knew Naomi, and Naomi sent me an invite. So
that's pretty cool. I've been learning through this process. You know, I'm an administrator. I don't write. I've been learning how important the support of a group is. Not only, like Naomi said, for deadlines, you know, and I guess every group needs one type A personality to put everything together. So does anyone else have any other? Oh, there's another question here. How much thematic similarity is needed for an anthology?
Isn't it just as much as you want? I don't know.
I feel like it depends on the anthology. Like, our anthology was based on the theme of, we originally said something is not what it seems, and it turned out that all the stories were really dark, so we kind of shifted a little bit in that direction. Some anthologies are just based on genre. Some of them have like a specific topic that you're supposed to write about, so it kind of just depends on the individual project.
Weren't you in one that was just Set It in the Adirondacks?
Yes, I that one also came out this week.
Did it? Good for you.
The premise was just mystery or ghost story type things set in a specific location.
Cheyenne, you should put the link to that in the chat.
Okay, please hold.
All of you, feel free to put any links that you want into the chat. Does anyone have any other questions, or do you guys have any other things that you want to mention? Thank you so much for being here. So this is taped, and after May 18th, I'm going to put all the recorded sessions onto the springwrites.org website, because there are a number, all the Zoom sessions were taped, recorded, and some of the live ones too. So you can see things that you may have missed. But thank you, everybody. Have a good night. And if anyone wants to stay on for an after party, that's fine.
Thank you so much, everyone who showed up.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess the last thing I'll just say is, you know, on that website, I kept sharing, I'm going to be updating all the different places that we might do readings, hopefully in person. So we've got